Your parents never told you the truth.
What truth?
The year of your birth, there was a prophecy that our leader would be born to liberate us.
That leader is you, Moses.
Oscar winner Christian Bale headlines an all-star cast in the epic Exodus, Gods and Kings. The all-white casting of this modern-day retelling of one of the Bible's greatest stories has sparked outrage and criticism. At the recent New York premiere, star Christian Bale had this to say about taking on such an iconic role.
That feels wonderful, you know. I mean, look, it's a story that has resonated for millennia. It's a story that means an awful lot to a great many people. I feel an awful lot of pressure in portraying this character, but I think that's completely appropriate. And I feel like we've taken a new approach to this, which hopefully you'll recognise and see in the film. I won't describe it.
I don't know about a new approach that we've taken. I think the new approach is to remake a Hollywood classic. Not that well. So now I'm going to start with you, Matt, because I think that you pretty much vehemently did not like this film at all.
Vehemently is pretty strong.
Okay.
It's visually nice to look at,
Yes.
but I think you like the quote I'm going to say right now.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a biblical epic. It looks like a biblical epic, but it's about as stale as a communion wafer. It's completely, it could crack if you just snapped it like that. And that's because the performances really are quite terrible, actually.
Well, you know, my performance is not the issue I have with the film. Now,
Same here. It's not
what was
about
your
the
thoughts?
performances. Somehow the transformation, Ridley Scott wanted to make it scientifically believable some way. For instance, I think so, because for instance, I think the biggest disappointment will be the Red Sea, how it's supposed to part, but instead there's this tide that
Comes in and goes out.
So there were
Epic
all
tide.
Yes, so there were all these. The storytelling changed, but it didn't work.
Well, it truncated the story, and I have a lot of things to say about this movie. But I have to ask you this now. You know, you're European and you're not a person of color, but you felt that the recasting or the casting of all white, you felt he's a director and he should be able to cast who he wants.
Yes, I mean, I understand the controversy, but I think he's an artist, so he's free to express. To cast the people he prefers to represent this thing. Actually, I find amusing that there's someone named Christian who's playing Moses.
Wow.
So,
all right, I got to speak on this. Now, first of all, I got to say this. Now, I can't find a good reason to remake this film. Okay.
I agree.
One is the only reason to remake the film, of course, it's in 3D and it's spectacle and it's IMAX. Okay, and that's the reason to make the film. And as far as I'm concerned, nobody's going to see that movie for Christian Bale or Joel Edgerton. No. Nobody cares. People go because it's the Ten Commandments. Biggest problem I have with the film is that if you didn't see the Ten Commandments, you go, oh, who's that character? Who's that character? It's only because you saw the Ten Commandments you know who these people are. In terms of the recasting, my honest opinion is I don't think it even occurred to Ridley Scott.
And he had a quote that kind of said that as well.
Yeah, I don't think it even occurred to him to cast it the way it should have been cast. And I think that many filmmakers like Ridley Scott, many white filmmakers, have no problem just perpetuating the myth of their superiority that have always been in tons and tons of films, whether it's Gone with the Wind or it's any film. The whole idea that the only Egyptians that are dark are the slaves, the assassins, whatever. And it's unconscious racism, but it's blatant. All the Egyptians have tans and eyeliner. Even Christian Bale, when they tell him he's a Hebrew, all of a sudden he's not wearing eyeliner. You know, things like that. You know, and so for me, while I enjoyed the spectacle, I couldn't help but think it's a missed opportunity to have really cast this well.
So you embrace the controversy on him being racist somehow?
I think it's unconscious racism. I think it's just perpetuating what we've seen since the beginning of film, which is that the people are in charge. Even Egypt, only the white Egyptians are running things. The other ones are running around, and that's what I thought.
And the one who stands out most for me is Ben Mendelsohn, because I love him as an actor. He does a great crazy man kind of role, and he plays an eccentric in this movie, but it takes you out of it because it's so Ben Mendelsohn. It's not.
John Turturro is the dying pharaoh.
Oh, yes,
hello?
he was very amusing.
What was that?
Sigourney Weaver's
We're
5 lines.
going to move on. But would you recommend Kiara?
No-ish.
No-ish. Okay.
No-ish.
If you need to take a nap.
Oh, all right. Well, I have to say, rent the Ten Commandments and watch it on the big screen.
Yes.
Our next film is called The Captive. It's a thriller about a man whose kidnapped daughter disappeared 8 years ago, but is still alive. It stars Ryan Reynolds and, again, Rosario Dawson.
If you think that I did this, you come here and you arrest me.
Do you remember that brush that she used to love?
Yeah?
Well, I just found one.
All right, what's going on? Ideas?
There's a kidnapper, and there's a watcher.
With you, Kiara. This is a film that has a very fractured narrative, and you keep waiting for it to come together. I don't feel it ever did. Did you?
No, it never came. The topic was very interesting.
Fascinating.
And it reminded me of the case of Natascha Kampusch, this Austrian girl who was kidnapped as a child and remained with her sequester for like 10 years or so. And yes, as you said, though, the topic is great, but it loses it.
Now, Matt, you had a great quote for this.
Oh, my Rubik's Cube, yes.
Yes.
So I was never good at Rubik's Cubes as a kid, but they were always kind of engaging. So I'd play with it for a little bit and then get really frustrated and throw it against the wall. That's this movie. You get engaged immediately off the bat. It's an intriguing kidnap story. But as you get into it more, you're just getting more and more frustrated with that non-linear narrative that you mentioned before.
I felt that, and for me, I waited for it to come together, but also at a certain point, it just had huge plot holes. You know, you're an undercover cop, but you're going to go on TV talking about what you do,
and an
so
angry
everybody sees your
undercover
face.
cop for no reason.
It doesn't make sense. So there are a lot of things. This is a film that's worth seeing, but ultimately disappointing, I thought.
Yes.
Would you recommend?
Yes, for the subject matter.
I think for Kevin Durand, he plays a
Kevin
great
Durand
role
plays
that's
it.
nothing that he usually does.
Well, we'll be right back.
Coming up,
Michael Z. Wolfman
And Mickey Wolfman.
Mickey Wolfman.
has vanished.
So where would I find him?
He's technically Jewish, but wants to be a Nazi.
Got a spare picture I could borrow?
when California pothead Private Eye, Larry Doc Sportello's ex, shows up out of nowhere, she pulls him into a psychedelic world of trouble and a case he might not survive. Joaquin Phoenix and Oscar winner Reese Witherspoon star in Inherent Vice. Next, here on Arise on Screen.
But if you're Doc, it may all...
Michael Z. Wolfman
And Mickey Wolfman.
Mickey Wolfman.
has vanished.
So where would I find him?
He's technically Jewish, but wants to be a Nazi.
And a girl don't necessarily want to get into difficulties with those folks.
Got a spare picture I could borrow?
Well, maybe you're better off with the Nazi.
Whoa.
Inherent Vice is a dark comedy drama set in 1970 starring Joaquin Phoenix as Larry Doc Sportello. He's a drug-addicted California private eye who gets embroiled in a strange case brought to him by an ex-girlfriend who then disappears. Welcome back to Arise on Screen. Again with me here in the studio is Chiara Spagnoli-Gabbardi and
Hello.
Matt Donato. And I like the way you say Matt Donato better.
Mattonato.
Matt
That's
Donato.
right.
All right, so I have to say, you know, I am a hit or miss Paul Thomas Anderson fan. I think he's good sometimes. I think he's overrated often. This is a film that I wanted to like quite a bit, but just never quite took off the way I wanted to. But Matt, you love this movie.
The more I think about it, the more it's kind of eking its way into my top 10 of the year. I can't
Really?
totally
Wow.
explain why,
Okay.
but I got that it was a brilliant stoner noir, and it kind of plays out like an adult version of Looney Tunes, and it's referenced numerous times when characters say, "What's up, Doc?" They kind of throw those jabs in there, but I loved it. I was laughing the whole time, and so much.
Well, I sat there, I was mildly amused the whole time. I wouldn't say I laughed. Now, what about you, Chiara?
I was wondering what was going on.
You were wondering, like, why
I
nobody
was-
handed you a joint or something to...
Yeah, I thought it was particularly sexist. I didn't find it amusing, and I love the themes that Paul Thomas Anderson usually tackles, but not the way he tackles them. I think he's one of those directors who like to make movies for himself rather than for an audience, and this is the epitome of...
Well, this is based on a Thomas Pynchon novel, and Pynchon is one of those writers who people love his work, and has been optioned a million times, but no one's ever been able to get it right. And what he does here, as he does in a lot of his films, is kind of got a fractured narrative. Yeah. There are sequences where I don't know if it's a flashback, or I don't know if he's hallucinating, or I don't know if you're not supposed to know, and so you don't quite know what's going on many points in the film. You get a lot of exposition.
But that's half the fun of it, because Joaquin is so good and he immerses himself in the role. He's so ridiculously talented. I'm sorry.
He's ridiculously overrated.
No, the talent that he gets out of this, he gets lost in Sportello, and he kind of carries you into that insanity. When he's writing things in the notepad, you think he's taking really important notes. He's writing random notes and scribbles like, she said something Spanish. You know that has nothing to do.
Well, now you see, I think you see that as a metaphor for the film. I do too, but not in a positive way. I feel like it's like you have all this stuff. It's like Sound and Fury signifying nothing. So, you would not recommend?
No. Groovy is the word.
Groovy. Groovy, Ringo. And you would not recommend?
Groovy.
I would very much recommend this to the right people. That is very.
So we're the wrong people?
You're the wrong people.
Okay,
mainstream, probably wrong people.
Okay. We're mainstream, Mike.
Not mainstream, but you know what I mean. Special case.
Moving in that stream that is Maine. Okay. All right. Our final film is called We Are the Giant. It's a new documentary that tells stories of 6 ordinary individuals who are transformed when, in their struggle for justice, must decide whether to fight using peace or nonviolence or achieve freedom by any means necessary.
The people are like a giant, and the governments, they're like this little man. Why is it that this little small man can control this giant?
The more we are, the stronger we become.
I thought this was a really powerful documentary, and I liked how it took what's happening today and what you learned about as in what is called the Arab Spring, and what's going on over there, and also parallel it with things that have been going on throughout history. I found it particularly moving to see this movie, and at points I'm a little angry at what I saw. Now, you, Chiara, were you moved by this film?
Yes, I was very much touched. I love the metaphor of the people being crushed by this tiny person, and it's very emblematic of how we should all get together and overcome these dictatorships and conflicts. So it was a brilliantly done documentary.
I agree,
very powerful.
And I felt, especially with what's happening in this country right now,
exactly,
it really made me think, and I think it's something that should be seen. It reminded me of what happened with the Occupy Wall Street movement, where, you know, as opposed to what happened here is where people were angry and they wanted something to happen, but there was no leadership. Here, we have clear leadership, they had clear goals, they're going somewhere, and they created change. You, Matt, you were moved by this documentary too?
Yeah, it's inspirational because, I mean, number one, like, you look at what I'm doing right now, I'm talking about movies, yet there's people going against nations elsewhere, and it kind of really inspires you in a way. And it also brings to light these peaceful protests that turn violent so quickly. I mean, you just said Occupy Wall Street. Those never got that violent.
No.
Where you have in other nations people standing there holding flowers and then gunfire erupts from the government.
They get shot down. Well, I have to say, I would recommend this film.
Absolutely.
It's a tough sell because of some of the scenes with children and the images that are in there, but it's still something that should be seen.
Okay. Well, Chiara, I'm very sad to say that you are once again leaving us.
Leaving. Europe calls me back once more, but I can never stay away too long.
So some point in 2015 we may see.
Absolutely.
If you want to trade places, I'll go to Italy.
Oh yes, why not? You go to Italy, I'll say
you can wear like your Chiara mask.
Okay.
And practice saying your name.
Donato.
Donato, that's
there
perfect.
Okay.
Michele, it was a pleasure working with you.
Chiara Spagnoli Gabardi, it was a pleasure. Matteo Donato.
I'll be back.
You'll be back, okay. Well, it's been a lot of fun, and thank you both. And we'll be back next week. I'm Mike Sargent, and we'll be back to talk more movies here on Arise on Screen.